Hello and welcome to another episode of Indy Eye. I'm Michelle Piney, and joining me today is a true media legend. Dr. Jeff McMullen, AM, has been a journalist, television presenter, writer, and human rights and environment advocate for over 50 years. He's perhaps best known for his incisive reporting as a foreign correspondent on programs such as Four Corners and, of course, 60 Minutes. Throughout his prolific career, Jeff has continued to report on human rights atrocities around the world and experienced many narrow escapes from conflicts in places such as El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Sierra Leone. He has exposed environmental threats to areas such as the Galapagos Islands, the Great Barrier Reef, of course, and WA's Ningaloo Reef, and interviewed world leaders and the rich and famous. More recently, Jeff has been a tireless advocate for the plight of Indigenous Australians, which has included championing programs such as Ian Thorpe's Fountain for Youth, Indigenous Mentoring Experience, Engineering Aid Australia, My Land, My Tracks, the Walking with Spirits Festival, and Uncle Jimmy's Thumbs Up Nutrition Program, as well as Closing the Gap. Jeff has been awarded an Order of Australia Medal, a Pater International Current Affairs Award, Humanitarian of the Year for Variety, the Children's Charity, and the United Nations Media Peace Prize. Jeff McMullen, welcome to Indy Eye.
Michelle, thank you for that very gracious introduction. I'm really only humble about having had the opportunity to see so much of the world. And then I suppose I have the optimism as an Australian that we live in such a wonderful place that we should take action somewhere wherever we can personally. For me, that's been through journalism.
And as I said, we could probably spend the entire podcast on your achievements. But perhaps we can just move to, can we start, please, on, your current involvement and advocacy for First Nations people?
It's the starting point for me being Australian. I can't see how you can be here without being aware and then move to contribute in some way. So I listen to Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders. I hear what they ask me or my family to contribute. And then I think, well, I wasn't trained for that, but yes, I can do that. And let's go. And it's interesting, if I look back really over half a century of involvement with Aboriginal struggle, wherever I have responded to what Aboriginal people wanted to do, the good effort leads to something really long lasting. I think they understand how to get out of the poverty trap. I think they understand what kind of education will bring the change. And so all of the things on the front line for me now are, they've been there for a very long time, but we haven't really dealt with them by listening carefully and then acting together. So we're still removing Aboriginal children from their families into state care at a faster rate than during the historic stolen generations. That, of course, feeds into the over-incarceration of Aboriginal young people. So we still lock up in some states 10 and 12-year-old Aboriginal children.
And we've gone back there, but we've actually, in the Northern Territory, for example, where the age of incarceration was raised, they've gone back again with the new LNP government there.
That law and order response is ingrained in our history. We have two strands. Try to change the First Peoples, assimilation, and then the law response is harsh, thinking that will change Aboriginal people, whereas they know what is required is a hand up, not this bashing people down. As Chris Sara, the Aboriginal educator, pointed out long ago, stop doing things to us and work with us was his prescription. And I personally have thought that's where we all fit in. We are here at a time where this could be, in the 21st century, the most hopeful society on earth. but we need to shake off the baggage of our history, understand it, don't play the victimhood role, and certainly shred the racism that is still there.
Yeah.
We need to shake those historic trends of trying to change Aboriginal people, assimilation, and then with the harsh legal response, telling the courts that locking up Aboriginal children is going to change behaviour. Whereas Aboriginal elders have been telling us for decades, the starting point is these children are living in poverty and in their surrounds, they don't get the support that other Australian children have. So I've tried to personalise that. And if they ask, if they say, we would like our children to be able to read and write, we would like our children to have better health, we would like our children to have the opportunity to be free, to move, to experience everything my own children had. I hear that and I try to lend a hand. It's a very small part, Michelle, compared to really what's there for us to do as a nation.
And just on that though, Jeff, why do you think the voice referendum failed? And where do you see we go from there, really?
I think the voice referendum failed because we don't understand our history. We don't know what's in our constitution. And we are very good at finger wagging at other nations that have glaring racism persistent today. But we don't see what our history did
Yeah.
in denying many Australian families the opportunity to have the same thing as others. So the Voice campaign was derailed really by a minority of angry voices who, through misinformation and distortion, made the country, the 60% that voted no, made them think this was about offering Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders something very special. We were going to lose our backyards again.
Yeah.
So it's it's a very clear example, however, that if we don't do the work personally to try to understand how did we get to where we are now, and that process of listening, of changing the relationship, I've tried to contribute on that front. We need to understand one another to be able to live together. But it was a marker in our history, and it dealt enormous pain to the majority of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders.
And I do feel in a lot of ways that perhaps we would have even progressed further if if we'd gone down a different road. Obviously, it's too late now.
After the defeat of all of the referendums that have failed in Australian history, it's pretty clear that the politics sunk the idea.
Yeah.
Only a few have ever got up. Things like having High Court judges retire at an age. The reason is politics divides the community, and then the angriest voices are those that are heard, and we lose sight of what common ground we have there. That's certainly happened. And so you then go through a rebuilding process. I can look back and think the 1967 vote yes for Aborigines, the overwhelming referendum that said, yes, these people are our fellow
Yeah.
citizens, in terms of counting them into the census and making laws, the things that had been denied in the glaringly racist original constitution. That was a hopeful moment. I was a very young journalist at that time. Voting in that, I thought, yes, if we get on with it, we will be able to deal with the inequity. But each time these referendums set back the cause of unity, that's where politics, without bipartisanship, no referendum will get up. It was doomed almost from the beginning. And many people, including Aboriginal people like Gary Foley, the activist and historian, I'll say an old friend of mine, he said early on it has no chance really
Yeah.
because of the politics of the situation.
I feel as though, there's this other pervading kind of issue pretty much over the entire world, which is, of course, the leader of the so-called free world at the moment, which is, of course, Donald Trump and his influence on Australian politics. And I think that that certainly was a factor in terms of the opposition at the time being led by Peter Dutton, who was a, self-confessed Trump supporter. And out now that Peter Dutton actually lost the last election, we believe largely because of his Trumpian direction and views. Do you think that that's still having a major effect in our politics?
I think in terms of the Australian mainstream usually hovers around the centre of the political spectrum, and therefore parties that veer violently to the right was some of the rhetoric that was there in recent years, you
Mm,
could say, led to a common sense rejection of the Liberal National Party views on these issues. I think it is still there. It's dividing the opposition currently into at least three chunks.
yes,
It will keep them far removed from having any influence, let alone actually governing for a long time. But
yes,
the more worrying thing, Michelle, I see is when you spoke of the Trumpian influence, I mean, this is the great disruption that's occurring, I believe, for a bigger historical factor. We have the over 95 million, roughly, displaced people crossing borders. And so the pressures now of the displacement and the fear of difference is causing a grievance and an anxiety in so many places that the populists who use the angry, violent rhetoric against the displaced person is going to draw some attention. I do
mm,
believe in our hearts in Australia, usually common sense surfaces. We say, no, that's a ratbag point of view. Great Australian expression. Only a ratbag would say that because we know my first McMullen that ever came to this country, 1852, he'd lost his father in the potato famine in Ireland. He was looking for a place to find food and safety for the rest of the family, his brothers and sister. I think that is what is occurring now. So the opportunity in Australia is to get past this poisonous assault that I believe the opposition are making on our national unity. It's not only against the Labor government. We should be focusing on our unity to move, hopefully, forward because we have the capacity to address all of our internal, most serious challenges. The world at large, we won't be able to respond to those challenges unless we are unified. So I would urge those politicians on the right to leave behind the Trumpian rhetoric, the advance rhetoric that came through in the voice referendum, sets us back on the progress that steadily through many decades we have been making. We need hope and we need action, but we've got to do it together.
The difficulty, though, I guess, is that you have this situation where um, the media largely still will report all of those kind of extreme views because they're newsworthy, I guess, or they think they're newsworthy, and they give them a lot of airspace, which I think leads to this kind of hijacking of the narrative, really, where we're discussing these issues that aren't even really issues for most Australians. Most Australians do, I think, and I think you agree, don't identify with Donald Trump, don't identify with that whole kind of far right ideology. Yet it's constantly fed to us, through these media outlets and given more prominence. And then what you end up with is the government discussing those, being asked about these things constantly.
Modern media now, the all prevailing algorithm is profit.
Yeah.
Media doesn't exist truly to inform, to educate, or to even establish fact. It
Yeah.
actually is a matrix of competition for attention to a billboard to sell things.
Yes.
And this was pointed out probably 50 years ago by people like David Attenborough,
Yes.
those that were seeing the bigger picture. So all of the environmental science, the warnings about the bigger picture of what was happening in the world, complained that media didn't take seriously these things, and it was drawn to action and especially conflicts of any kind, conflicts between political
Yes.
parties, literally blood in the street. The media in Australia, media is no different, is drawn to that. And then inside that matrix, it shapes perception of what is the danger, what is the threat. So currently, a lot of the far right in Australian elected officials are absolutely exaggerating and distorting the picture of the immigrant to Australia, where, as I said earlier, so many of us in Australia come with somewhere back in our story, and the blending of peoples has been more successful here than anywhere else that I know. My own family, we have people from everywhere. And the Aboriginal mob that I know have always opened their arms to this and said, the land holds us.
Yes.
When we're here, be responsible to those eternal things, but shed what baggage you have from whether it's a war zone, a famine zone like my mob came from, still see what is here and come together. The media must start to accentuate the strengths and the hope and where we need to take action to improve existing social stresses. Those are fairly clear. A lot of it is that we have allowed the story to demonize certain peoples, and
Yes.
we allow conflicts from elsewhere to be played out in our streets. And I learned, having covered violence now for every year that I've been a journalist or a writer or a filmmaker, I've learned that it is a contagion. So while our own society is so much healthier and so much more hopeful, be aware that the poison of racism and division and beating down on immigrants and the whole notion that anyone who came on a boat like this is somehow less than human. I just say very simply, put yourself in the shoes of any of those you see anywhere in the world or in our own postcodes of poverty, and you become a reasonable human being. You just see that, look, actually here, this is a hopeful place. Let's get on with building a great society. We can do it.
Where do you see the future for Australia's media? How can we move forward and embrace, a truly independent media landscape in Australia?
I think we need to celebrate a very old Australian characteristic of egalitarian pride in speaking up, giving the other fella a chance to be heard, recognizing that women and children have a story just as important as that fella's, and then don't be monopolized. Realize that it is the valuing of our diversity of voices, the sense of equality that all people are entitled to an opinion. And the independent media are the only ones that can actually create the platforms, and that they have to be flexible. They have to improvise. They have to often uh, reconstitute in a form that can handle the complexity of today's media landscape. AI will revolutionize everything, but in that same revolution, we're going to be in a very murky period. I mean, we used to say in a war zone, you need more than night vision goggles to actually see the truth of things. I think the metaphor holds for the complexity of information today, and getting back to in Australia, believing that you have the right to speak up and be truthful. Don't persecute people for opinions that we might take as offensive, but enjoy that kind of debate that would take part in our parks or in the corner outside a pub, or around our own family table. Cherish that, because a lot of parts of the world I've been, we don't have that. The new journalism should celebrate a very old tradition of the egalitarian spirit and the belief that we can go anywhere in the world as an Australian journalist and get the facts right and be brave about sharing those back home.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being with us today.
And thank you for all that you've done over these past 15 years of independent Australia. To get out the truth of things, it does take, as you've both said, sometimes you need the money and then you end up putting your own money up for it. I've done that on films, and I look back and I think, yeah, but we got the film made, or I wrote for years in the Aboriginal newspapers. I've never ever been paid a cent
No.
for decades.
Oh,
Like a
yeah.
lot of the contributions and David's investment in IA. But the films, I look back and I think I tried to get mainstream play, even having worked for the ABC for decades and done a show in the 21st century for them on the Aboriginal issues. They never really want any voice, as Stan Grant found out.
No.
They don't want voices
No.
that unsettle. I found that when I was there doing difference of opinion for
They want the
those that
party line, don't they, really?
absolutely.
Whatever that
And
is.
are fearful that their federal funding might be cut off. So,
Yeah.
but I look back and I think when during the intervention period, uh, later to do coming up to the anniversary of Cook's arrival, we made a film about the Aboriginal point of view of Cook wherever he went. Those films now are really historical work. They were frontline activist kind of journalism, but it's in the Maritime Museum. It'll be there forever. Whereas a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff I did in the mix of things as a foreign correspondent, some of those films are even lost in the ABC archive. So you look back and you think you have immediate impact sometimes, you change some things, but it's your own compass. It's
Yeah.
whether you really believed on those stories on I've got to get it out. Where do I go?
Yeah.
And you would probably write it on the sky or on a
Yeah.
wall, if you had to, because you say people need to know this.